Good evening, everybody. My name is Attorney Chris DeBerry. Welcome to another segment of my weekly presentation where we discuss various legal issues that pertain to personal injury and accidents and damages. Today, we are lucky to have as our guest Rachel Sobiak. Rachel is a licensed clinical social worker with Enzo Behavioral Healthcare in Tampa, and she is going to discuss a particularly important topic today, and it concerns something called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a process that helps people to address traumatic issues. That's just putting it very lightly and very simply. But Rachel, thank you for coming and being with us here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And I just remind to the audience, if you like what you hear today, feel free to comment or share below. Hit the like button, always helps. And ask your questions. I often base entire segments on people's questions, and this is some pretty good stuff. So tell us a little bit about your background.
All right, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I got my master's in social work at Western Tampa, and then I went through the licensing process to get become licensed. And then I also recently completed my EMDR training just this year. I'm still in the process of finishing up my supervision hours, but I'm able to complete it and help clients that way through EMDR.
Originally.
What was that?
Are you from Florida?
I was actually a military child, so I moved everywhere. I've lived in Florida about 10 years now.
Oh, that's really great. Okay. And now you're a licensed clinical social worker, and that is, you basically do things similar to that which a psychologist would do.
Yep. Counseling, therapy. I do individuals. I've done couples, family, so it's open.
Okay. And so I guess a large part of your practice, you're dealing with some form of emotional trauma, whether that be brought on by something on the outside, something physical, or I guess something that's organic or internal.
Yeah.
with people. In my line of work, we tend to see a lot of this occur as a result of motor vehicle accidents and those traumas that occur. You and I were talking about it a little bit earlier, but this is sort of near and dear to my heart. I was knocked unconscious in 2000 in a motor vehicle accident, and that was quite an experience. I'm like the worst passenger you can possibly have in your car right now. If I'm riding in your front seat, I'm grabbing that handle and I'm leaving my fingerprints on it. I have a little bit of an idea of how it can be, but I know that for some people it's very, 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 very difficult. So what is it like? What is the onset of psychological trauma like after an accident or something like that?
So trauma can be many different things. It could be that death, it could be serious injury, it could be sexual violence or witness events, or even learning of an event, or continued exposure. EMTs, firefighters, police officers, that can all create this PTSD, right? This post-traumatic stress. Go ahead.
So it seems like it occupies a tremendous range. So I tend to look at it a little more narrowly, but you make an interesting point: repetitive exposure to not just trauma that you experience, but traumas that other people experience. It kind of shows that we're all sort of connected in a way. Our actions, our emotions, our reactions affect other people. So you deal with quite a broad range of trauma, and how do you know that a person is at the point where they will probably need to see somebody for therapy?
That's based on an individual's individual, but typically symptoms more than a month, then it's probably something to, if it's hindering your life in any way, if it's hindering your relationship, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Symptoms. What kind of symptoms that one might experience?
So there's a long list of symptoms. So I'll try to go through them briefly. So symptoms can just be recurring, involuntary, intrusive thoughts, or distressing memories of the event that can be taken in dreams. You can have flashbacks where you feel like the event return again. You can have like negative cognitions or moods associated with the event, like the inability to remember the event, or negative beliefs like it's your fault, or that no one else can be trusted, whatever it is resulting around your event. The inability to experience positive emotions. Sometimes there's like fear, anger, guilt that kind of comes to the surface. So lots of different. We can have like sleeping disorders, concentrating. So it can be extreme symptoms, and it can also be much milder. So there's like a wide range a person can experience.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, it affects you in so many ways. And you know, one of the things that you mentioned that I find particularly interesting is guilt. How does guilt figure into that formula?
It kind of depends on like the traumatic experience. So let's say you were in a car accident and another person died. And I feel like, oh my gosh, this is my fault, even though it could have not been, or like I was to blame somehow, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be healed already if it happened.
So it's interesting, but people seem to have an expectation for how they should behave even when they've suffered trauma. So I guess it could even be disappointment in well, it seems to almost result in just something that's a little too broad to really comprehend or understand. And so, Jeff, that's pretty interesting. You would actually feel guilty because something beyond your control didn't work out in a good way.
Right.
That's pretty interesting. So these things, and why is it these things don't just process themselves through our own subconscious process? Why don't we just go to sleep at night and have this process in our dreams and so forth, and wake up in the morning, over the course of a couple of mornings maybe, and just deal with it? Why does it seem to kind of arrest people's development?
So trauma kind of stamps our brain, and then like where it doesn't get processed properly, where it needs to be stored, where we can continue moving forward, where we start experiencing those symptoms when it didn't get processed. So it's kind of like a stamp on the brain that didn't get processed properly.
Now, I mean, we all experience painful life events, and I guess the trauma is probably defined that way as painful life events, in various different forms. But what makes certain painful life events more likely to leave a deeper impression than other ones?
I feel that's also based on an individual's base, like thoughts and feelings. Like one person can be in a car accident and not find that traumatic, where someone can be in that exact situation and they have a hard time getting through it. Or someone, a kindergarten teacher might say something that a child could do for the rest of their life, where it impacts them, and that could be traumatic, where another person would just be like, oh, they said this not very nice by me.
That's so really it is a very individualistic thing. And I guess part of your job is determining how to approach this on an individual basis. So this is not group therapy, I take it.
No, I wouldn't. There's like groups you could to do like processing those events, but like EMDR specifically, I would never do as a group.
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted to get into, because you and I discussed EMDR, and I think it's fascinating. So that's, if a person is not processing a traumatic life event the way one would normally, just sort of on their own, working things out subconsciously. So there are modalities that you can apply or perform as a therapist that could potentially help this. And one of them, I understand, is the EMDR, which I indicated was eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So tell us about that. That's some fascinating stuff.
So EMDR, it's fun. So EMDR, it's a psychotherapy treatment. So it was designed to alleviate distress associated with traumatic memories. So it's there to reprocess the traumatic event. So like that reprocessing. But that's basically what the goal is to alleviate that, reprocess it where it needs to be, where it's not hindering your life, it's not affecting your temperament, your environment, how you function. Because completely. It's interesting.
So give us, say, a typical scenario. Suppose a parent were to come in having been involved in a car accident where they were injured and perhaps their child was injured as well. Obviously not horribly or fatally, but enough that the parents' sense of responsibility, and they just feel completely guilty about it. So you're at a point where you feel that this process needs to be engaged in. What do you do? How does that begin?
So it's a pretty long process. It's not like you go in for one session and that's it. Actually, there's like an 8-phase process. I can talk briefly about. So you go in, we talk with that family history. We build rapport, that was comfortable with me. Basically, I give you a timeline, like a homework. So you write out a timeline of like traumatic things that have happened. Because it's not like EMDR fixes all of the trauma in one session. It's one of those things we work on one at a time. And typically we start with the smaller, that way we can build up to the bigger traumas. And then, go ahead.
Oh, continue, please.
So that was just like our phase 1. It goes into the phase 2, which is like preparing them for EMDR. It's creating a safe space, because in EMDR, it can be pretty intrusive. You could experience feelings, images, memories, body sensations, and educate those different things, nightmares. So the education aspect is pretty important in creating safe environments. And a lot of times people are like, well, why would I do EMDR? I'm going to re-experience this trauma, right? So it's just temporary pain for a more permanent solution versus like continuously talking through the trauma therapy. You
indicated, I guess, there are 8 or so steps to the process.
Yeah, so it takes more than one session. You have typically like those first few stages are like individual sessions. So we'll see each other one-on-one before we even start the EMDR process. So after those 2, then we go to the third part where we determine the target image, what trauma I'm trying to work on today. The cool thing about EMDR, it's self-healing. You don't have to know what your trauma is. You have to know it in your head, and you go from there.
So the first few sessions were just one-on-one. What are you working to establish during those sessions?
We're working to build rapport. We're working to get like prepared for EMDR, because it can be hard sometimes going through it. It can be difficult, but the outcome is worth it.
And what type of information, other than just establishing trust and rapport, is there any particular information that you're looking to elicit, or is it too soon?
Once we get to that assessment part of the phase 8, we pick out one traumatic experience. We kind of pick out an image and we pair that image with a negative cognition. So let's say, what's a good example? Like let's say we're dealing with someone who was sexually abused as a child, and their cognition could be like, I don't matter. So we'll team those together, and our goal is to get that to a positive cognition of like, I do matter. Like I am.
Okay.
Stress level down from a 10 to a 0 or a 1 from that traumatic experience.
And then suppose this were somebody that were say injured in an accident. Okay. So they're having problems. We tend to kind of giggle a little bit sometimes that, well, I'm a terrible passenger, like I said, or God, I just can't ride in a car. And that sounds kind of amusing, but it really isn't. Mm-hmm. And you've been around people that have seriously had to live that. So trying to get people back into their normal lives, is that even possible for people?
Oh, absolutely. So let's say, okay, your car accident, a negative cognition with that would be, I'm not in control. Because in a car accident, a lot of times you're not in control. So once we get to that later stages, so the 4th stage is to start the bilateral stimulation. And that's kind of what I can talk about, the hypotheses of EMDR, but I can get there eventually.
Okay.
But the bilateral simulations, there's multiple ways to do it. There's the light bar. A lot of people see. Some therapists just use their fingers and they go back and forth. You can do tapping, or I use like tappers. They're little bubbles that go in your hand with audios. So it's buzzing back and forth as well as buzzing back and forth in your hand. So that bilateral stimulation kind of helps your brain reprocess it, just like it would in REM sleep. It's kind of stimulates the same thing.
So you are manually creating sort of a simulation of rapid eye movement.
Yes.
Oh, so you can, I didn't know you can do that. You can reproduce the effects of REM sleep, I guess, while somebody's in a conscious state.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's amazing. Wow. And so you're, it sounds like you're actually helping people in the conscious state affect themselves in a way that their subconscious isn't prepared to allow them.
Right. And it's awesome because it's self-healing. So I'm not talking most of the time. There's actually very little talk in EMDR. I'll buzz it for a certain amount of times. Appropriate. You're processing it yourself in your head. You're not telling me what's going on. I'll pause it. I'll be like, what do you notice? You'll tell me. Eventually we'll get to a point where you recognize there's where it's processed, where you're like, there's a positive output. So like that's when we install the positive cognition of maybe I am in, or I don't have to have control when you relate it to that.
And now, as far as the actual healing itself, does that take place during a particular aspect of EMDR, or is it really the whole process itself? When does the healing really start to take place?
I would say during that the bilateral simulation, that's when your brain starts processing. But even after we end session, your brain is still going to be processing it once you walk out that door. So a lot of times that's why people experience is like nightmares or their cognition changes. So they might be able to get in a car the next day and drive when they haven't in a long time.
Wow. So you could actually have a dramatic result with at least an aspect of it.
Yep.
Wow. That's fascinating. And you're able to create this environment, you know, and there are certain types of phenomena in our society as far as therapeutic modalities that we hear about that might be associated with certain groups of people that follow a particular philosophy, but this is actually
like evidence-based.
It's evidence-based. It's objective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. Now, is there any hypnotic process involved in it, or is it just simply?
No, you're never really in like disassociated anywhere. You're still present with me. And we don't want you to be somewhere else. We want you to kind of stay in the environment with me.
Say that one more time. You kind of fuzzed out a little bit. I'm sorry. Tonight, you know how bad it is. The reception's kind of in and out of it.
I wouldn't say it's related to hypnosis. They're very different. This is more of like self-healing. You're in the moment. You're aware of where you are at the time.
But you're creating the safe environment. You've established rapport.
Yeah. And
you get the people to a place where they can feel good about sharing the experience. So do you come to like a point in the sharing of the experience where you're going to just, let's look at this as a snapshot. Let's stop. Let's focus on this moment. Is that an important thing to do?
That's kind of where yes, in multiple aspects. So you'll start with like a target image. You'll think of like the worst case image in your trauma. So let's say you notice the truck coming at my car. That's where we're going to screenshot this. We're going to tie it to that negative cognition of I'm not. And then we're going to do the bilateral stimulation until you're able to process into a positive. It's okay, I'm not in control. Until you're able to reach that point. Sometimes you can reach it within 5 minutes. Sometimes you might have to come back to a second session to get to that point. So everything's very different when it comes to that.
Once you've begun successfully getting your clients to process
Mhm.
these very, very difficult traumatic events. How do you, I mean, is there a requirement is there a maintenance? You get your teeth adjusted with braces and then you have to wear a retainer for months and months to keep them in place. But once you've been properly, once the stuff has been properly processed, is there a maintenance aspect to it?
Typically, there shouldn't be. Sometimes there might be a little things like, let's say you've in the process of getting into a car or being passenger into a car, but you still need to work on getting the driver's seat. That might take another couple of sessions, and like different cognitions that are paired with it. But once we hear that positive cognition, I kind of start shutting down the bilateral and see what our stress level is at. Like we reassess, like, is this experience still a 10 or are we down to that 0 or 1?
Okay. One of our guests, want to thank Diana Kuntz. She commented and she said, this was suggested to me helping with recurring nightmares. So I just had a question. Is there a difference in the way you'd approach the process with a person that might be having nightmares due to something unrelated to physical trauma as opposed to how you might approach it with somebody that's been in an accident and is experiencing that kind of trauma?
Same basic concepts. You'll like EMDR is different things. It's good for anxiety, depression, trauma, addiction, eating disorders. There's a wide range where it can help.
Does the mind make a distinction between those types of traumas?
What do you mean?
Well, does the mind make a distinction between trauma due to something that's purely psychological as to something that might have been originally physically induced?
I don't really. That's a tough one. I'm not sure how to answer that, to be honest.
It occurred to me if you use the same process for both things, it would seem to me that the brain kind of identifies the things similarly.
Yeah, I would say so. I think that initial trauma, regardless of what it is, it didn't get processed how it should, right? If these symptoms are going on longer than a month, where it's impeding our lives, our families, our homes, then we need to do something about it. We need to take care of it. Trauma can lead to increased suicidal thoughts and feelings, and that's not how an individual, not a healthy way to live, right?
Once you've gotten to the point where you're starting to see the positive signs that you're looking for with regard to the processing, what happens then?
So once we get that positive cognition, we bring that distress level down to a lower level. We're shutting it down. So that's the positive cognition. Once we recognize it, it's stage 5. Stage 6, we go into a body scan. We feel our bodies. So if you were in a car accident, it wouldn't be abnormal to be like, my back hurts, because EMDR, you could kind of visit those physical feelings, right? So we want to reprocess the body or whatever physical things we're feeling. So we might do some couple bilateral simulations to try to alleviate that pain if you're re-experiencing that. And then from the body scan, we would just do our closure, reevaluate that, and then that's that.
Well, so you're actually helping to restore relaxation to the body, which interestingly also helps the healing process. So that's amazing. That's not exactly the main idea, I guess, but processing the negatives is the main idea. But there seems to be a potential effective byproduct because you're putting the person in a state of ease, and that's obviously better for the body than the state of disease. We talked about if you're going to have an animal for dinner, if you're going to catch you don't want to distress the animal, you don't want it to be in that horrible state. Its psychology affects its physiology, and I guess the same holds true with human beings. That's some amazing. So, anything else that you may want to add? I thought this was great.
And typically, after we do an EMDR session, I'm like, okay, goodbye. You come back. Typically, we talk about it, we process it together verbally to see like what you've experienced over the past week. Are you having any side effects from EMDR? Is there anything we need to do another bilateral simulation with? So I, just like free. You got to come back and make sure everything's good still.
But you're able to follow up. I mean, have you ever had cases where it just seems like even 1, 2, 3 follow-up sessions wasn't enough, or does it usually resolve itself within a couple sessions?
because then we start working on other things, like, and if we can process EMDR with any recent event too, like maybe I'm having trouble at work and this boss is bothering me. We can process those feelings and see where it leads and try to come to a solution through EMDR.
You make an interesting point too. Recent events. How effective is a process like this on longer held issues? Like suppose somebody has maybe abandonment issues or psychological things that sort of kind of seated themselves in adolescence and pre-adolescence. Can you actually deal with things that are that old?
Yes. So typically, a lot of times, you might just come in for like this recent problem with my boss, and then because it's through your healing process, your brain's processing things. A lot of times, like tiny things like abandonment, it can lead to how we are human today, right? So we can have traumatic experiences and results from EMDR. We might come in for an issue with my boss, and the process won't take us back to childhood where I was with my father and I didn't feel loved. So now I don't feel loved at work.
Well, I understand. Well, actually, interestingly, your boss is watching. Angie Speller is with us.
Of course she is. Hi, Angie.
Angie, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being there and watching our presentation. Angie is the owner of Enzo Health Behavioral Services, and we thank her for being part of our presentation and giving us some input. Thank you very much. This has really been great having you, and I think it's a fascinating area. I think that people that have been involved in traumatic situations really should avail themselves. People that are having issues that they can't get past. You seem to offer a almost predictable, objective sort of approach, and sometimes an approach is what people need. Oh, it's been great having you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I've never done this before, so I enjoyed it.
We'll have to have you back again, because sometimes there are multiple areas that you may want to concentrate on, one at a time. I think that as far as psychology is concerned, exploring that aspect of treatment and damages too, because it's part of the damages we present to juries and to insurance companies. So it's very, very important. But what you need proper diagnosis and proper treatment so that you can address the damages. The idea is for the patient not to stay injured and ill, but rather to get well. And that's hugely important. And you address a very important aspect of it. So thank you very much. And folks out there listening, thank you for tuning again. Once again, if you like the content, please feel free to hit the like button, share this information, comment below if you'd like. And once again, thank you very much. And okay, we're gonna tune out now. But thank you, Rachel, once again for being on the show.
I appreciate it.
Everyone who tuned in.